welcome to the third lecture of this lecture series entitled Let's Game It. Hello, myself Russell, and I, along with my friend Uninan Kurup, again bring to you the third lecture of the series. So, without much ado, we'll start the lecture. And before we begin, we also would like to inform you that we're trying to come in a completely new look. We are using a different software. It's an online software, and we're trying to make it as interesting as possible, and we're trying to break free the monotonous PowerPoint presentations that we usually have and trying to do something new. So see if you like it and support us. Thank you. So let's start. Okay, so before we get into the actual presentation, let us see the contents that we have. So as you can see, the contents that we have for today is, we'll start with sequential move games. If you remember, last time we did simultaneous move games, so today we're going to start with sequential move games. So we'll first talk about some basic terminologies, some basic notations and other things. Then we'll give a general example to see how exactly do we identify, do we play a sequential move game, and how do we arrive at the equilibrium. And then we'll give a specific example of a electoral competition, and then we'll move on to something called food for thought, and then as usual an interesting trivia. Then we'll have a reality check, and then we'll give an example to support the claims that we're going to make in the segment called reality check, and then finally we're going to summarize the entire thing. So that's the gist of today's presentation. That's going to be the gist of this presentation. So without further ado, let's go to the introduction. So as you can see, the introduction is basically, so we're going to introduce basic terms. So what exactly is a sequential move game? Sequential move games entail strategic situation in which there is a strict order of play. So if you remember, the basic difference between simultaneous and sequential move game is this: in simultaneous move game, there is no order. Both of them are taking the decision almost at the same time. So that's why it's called simultaneous. And why it's called sequential is because there is a particular order in which the game is going to be played. What does that mean? The players in this game take turns making their moves, and they know what the other players who have gone before have done. That is again a different, stark contrast, I would say, to the simultaneous move games that we have dealt with in the last lecture. Over there, the players don't know what exactly the other player is going to do, or other players have already done. So they don't have the privilege of seeing first what he has done and then making move. But here, that's the sequential part of these kind of games. They can first see the move of the other players, what they have done, and then they'll think and make their moves. To play well in such a game, participants must use a particular type of iterative thinking. Now, what is this particular type of iterative thinking? That we are going to discuss in the consecutive slides. Now, each player must consider how her or his opponent will respond if he or she makes a particular move, as we have discussed. So what they are going to do is, they have to, before making a move, they have to see if the move that they are going to make, or what kind of move the other players are going to make. Based on that, they are going to make their moves. Now, players thus decide their current moves based on the calculations of future consequences. Now remember, the basic assumption over here is rationality. So that's why the calculation of future consequences becomes possible. Now let's so now we'll start the actual presentation. So to start with, a game in extensive form with complete information consists of the following: a set of players, that can be 2, 3, multiple, but we'll deal with 2 players. A set of n nodes. What do you mean by node? We'll give an example and then we'll be able to understand it better. A set P of actions or moves. Now, what do you mean by root node? So a root node is a node that is not the end of any move. Just for the time being, just bear with me, and then we'll go to the specific, the general example, and I'll again explain all these things. And the terminal node, as the name suggests, terminal node is a node that is not the start of any particular move. Then what is a path? Path is basically a sequence of moves such that the end node of any move in that sequence is the start node of the next move in the other sequence. So just have a look at them. And now let's go to the general example to try to match with the point that we have made over here. So this is called a decision tree. Yeah, I don't know. I thought the color would be much more apparent, much more better, but I don't know whether it's looking better or not. Please forgive me and bear with me. So what happens in decision tree? So see, this person is called person 1, let's say. So the person 1 has two moves to choose, B or C, or let's name it yes and no. Now once the person 1 chooses yes, the person 2 also has the two same options, yes and no. And after person 1 chooses no, person 2 has again same options. Either person 2 can choose yes or no. Now how do we read this? This is a payoff. So in simultaneous move games we have a payoff matrix, but here we don't have that. Of course we can reduce a sequential move game in a normal form Nash, but we're not going to deal with that. For the timing we'll stick to this. So how do we read this? See, the last value, like, because there are two people playing, so that's why there are two values. This last value corresponds to the last player who has made the move. So over here, who is the last player? The person 2. So this value corresponds to this person's payoff, and this value corresponds to this person's payoff. Similarly for everything. How do we read this? If person 1 chooses yes and also person 2 chooses yes, this is the payoff that both of them get. If person 1 chooses yes and person 2 chooses no, then 10 goes to person 2 and 5 goes to person 1. Similarly, you can read all these things. Now let's go back a bit. We have a set of P players. Here we have two players, set of N nodes and P actions. So what do you mean by nodes? Nodes is these places, these points. Like let's say this is one, B, C. Here also see the end points, this one, this one, this one, and this one. Over here, this one and this one. So these are called nodes. And actions or moves are the different strategies that they are playing. A root node is what? Is a node that is not the end node of any move. That means here we have a root node like this. Root node, as the name suggests, has to be the origin node, the node from where the entire tree is coming up. Terminal node is a node that is not the start of any move. So these are the terminal nodes. These can't be terminal nodes because from this node there is a move which is growing. There is a move which is growing. So that's why these two cannot be terminal nodes. Rather, these are the terminal nodes because after this there is no move. So this is the root node and these are the terminal nodes. Now path is a sequence of moves such that the end node of any move in the sequence is the start node of the next move in the sequence. So path is basically something like, person 1 chooses yes, person 2 chooses yes, so we end up here. So this particular place, A to B, B to this is a particular path. Okay, now we'll move. Now how to arrive at an equilibrium. Now see, given point B, person 2 will choose yes. So now, how do you arrive at an equilibrium or Nash equilibrium over here? You have to compare these values first. So this is what we call as the method of backward induction. Okay, so person 1, before making a move, calculates in his brain, in his mind, what person 2 is going to make, and after the person 2 makes that particular move, what he is going to guess is evident to person 1. So from there he will do a back calculation and choose the strategy which suits person 1 the best. Now of course you can say then the person who is moving first will always have the advantage of foreseeing what the other players are doing and taking the decision. Yes, the player has that advantage. The first player who is coming in the game first time has that advantage that he can foresee things and then take a decision. That's why it's called a first mover advantage as well. So how do you read it? First compare these two values. So values of person 2 between two choices, yes and no, 20 and 10. So because 20 is greater than 10, so person 2 will choose this. Similarly, again this two node, compare values of person 2, payoffs of person 2, yes and no, 5 and 10. So which one the person 2 is going to choose? Person 2 is going to choose this. So after we take this 2, we eliminate the other 2, right? And now what we are going to compare? We are going to compare person 1's payoff, because person 2 has already decided and person 1 has already calculated that in his mind. So now he'll see which one suits him better. Of course 20. So that's where 20, 20 becomes the payoff or payout or the equilibrium. This is also called, this process of arriving at this particular equilibrium called backward induction or rollback analysis. And the equilibrium that we arrive at is called rollback equilibrium or subgame perfect equilibrium. So now we'll go to a specific problem. It's called a Senate race 2. So what happens, there is one senator who is from the right party and who is going to run against a challenger called for the left party. Now they first choose a political platform that is either from right party or left party, but the senator has to move first. Senator means this incumbent senator. If both choose the same platform, that means if senator and the challenger, that means leftist parties moves or the platforms match, then the incumbent, that is the senator, wins. But if they do not match, then the challenger wins. Keep this line in mind, this is important. Now assume that the value of winning is 10. So if any one of them wins, either incumbent or the challenger, they get 10. But the value of compromising their political views, what do we mean that? If we know that senator is from right party and challenger is from the left party, but if the incumbent suddenly shifts to left or is forced to shift to left, or same thing for the challenger, if he is forced to shift to right, then that's where they are compromising their political views. That's when they get -5. And what is the payoff then? The payoff is a summation of these two. Okay, even if seems a bit confusing right now, I hope it will not be once we go to the game tree. So as you can see here, the senator moves first. He can choose either left or right. So if he choose left, then the challenger makes a move. The challenger has the option either to choose left or to choose right. If he chooses left, now see how they are getting these payoffs. Let's say senator choosing left, challenger is choosing left. As we have mentioned in the previous one, that if the platform of both of them matches, then the incumbent wins. That means the senator is winning, so he's getting 10 and challenger is supposed to get 0. But you may ask, how come it's 5? Because the senator is from the right party And there was another condition which says that if the senator is compromising on his political view, that means he is shifting from right to left, he is getting -5. So total is 10. As you have said, because the senator is compromising on his political view, he is shifting from right to left. That's why he is losing on -5. So the total is, as we have mentioned before, the payoff is actually the sum of these values, both the values, winning and also the losing because of compromising their political views. So because that's why he is getting 5, because 10 minus 5 is 5. What's happening here? See, senator has played as opted from left, so he is getting -5. But again, see, challenger is now opting to right. So both of them are not, I would say, representing the same political party, or their platforms are not matching with each other. And we have another condition which says that if both choose the same platform, only then the senator would win. Otherwise, the challenger wins. Who is the challenger over here? The challenger is from the left party. So because their political views are not matching here, one is from the left, one is from right, the challenger is winning. Now again, you may ask why it's only -5, because the challenger so here the senator is getting -5 because he is losing, he's changing his political view. And why challenger is getting 5 here, not 10, even though challenger is winning? Because challenger is from the left party, but here even challenger is also changing his political view from left to right. That's why he is getting 10 minus 5 equals to 5. That's how you can even look at these two values as well. Now if you find out the subgame perfect Nash from here, what we should do? First compare these last two values, whichever is greater, this one, so stick with this. Here also last two values, which is greater, this one, so stick with this. So this one and this one. Now compare between these two. You'd see that 0 is greater than -5. So 0, 10 becomes the subgame perfect Nash equilibrium, which says, this being the Nash, that in the equilibrium the senator is going to lose and is going to get 0, but the challenger is going to get 10. That means even though the senator started first, even though the senator had the first mover advantage of moving first, still he lost. It happens in cases where the second mover actually adjusts with the expectation of the first mover. That's what we call the second mover advantage. Even though it not exactly doesn't reflect that, but in pricing games many a times we get to see that. We'll discuss that later. So now we'll go to a formal definition, or what we'd call as the Zermelo's theorem. This particular rollback analysis is what I should say is motivated, encouraged from or by this particular theorem. This theorem says that every finite perfect information sequential game without random moves. Okay, so there is an order of, as we have mentioned, there is an order of the moves. So we know that first one person is playing one move and then the other person plays two moves. There is no random moves. Okay, it's everybody knows what are the moves available to each one of them in that particular, and it's a finite perfect information sequential game. That means there is also a chance that we can have an infinite sequential game as well, but we're not going to deal with that. It's a finite sequential game. What would have been infinite sequential game? The steps would have been repeated infinitely. That means the senator in the previous game would have played left right, then the challenger would have played left right. Again, after looking at challenger's move, senator again would have played something. By looking at senator's move, again challenger would have played something. That would have become an infinite loop. But every finite perfect information sequential game without any random move can be analyzed by using this backward induction. The payoff values of the start position are what the players should expect when playing the game, provided, very important, all play rationally. If you break free this particular assumption, okay, if you relax this particular assumption of rationality and move into or border on something called behavioral economics, let's say, then what you get is something where this particular theorem doesn't hold good. So now let's move into the trivia section. When you talk about game theory, what comes to our mind first? Most of us think that von Neumann must have been the father of game theory, because his paper on game theory was first published in the year 1928. But do you know that Emil Borel and Ernst Zermelo, whose theorem we have just now seen, they have published papers in 1920s, much before the paper by John von Neumann was published. 8 to 9 years before that, they already published their papers, but it was not that famous. They actually used simultaneous move games in those papers way back in 1920s, much before von Neumann, but it was not famous. That's why people generally consider von Neumann to be the father of game theory, but before that, but he was not the first proponent. Before that, people already discussed this. So let's look at the pictures. So who are these two people? Ernst Zermelo was actually a German logician, and Emil Borel, many of you must have heard, he was a French mathematician. They have written papers in 1920s that use simultaneous move games way before von Neumann. Now here comes some food for thoughts. Now we have already discussed simultaneous move games, different types of simultaneous move games, where we get Nash equilibrium, we do not get Nash equilibrium, and we have also discussed sequential move games today, the basics of it. Now, again, it's not a particular certificate course or something where you have to do homework, so it's just a request. Can you think of ways game theory can be used in these games? There's no pressurizing you to come up with something, but if you can tax your brain a bit and come up with situations where, in a game of, let's say, hockey, in a game of, let's say, chess, in a game of, let's say, football, in a game of, let's say, cards or basketball or cricket or any other game whatsoever, can you use game theory and try to analyze the situations over there? Any simple situation. If you can, it will be very nice. It will be a good exercise for your brain. If you have any doubt regarding this, if you want to share anything with us on this, if you want to tell us what you think about this particular segment, that you have devised a particular game based on any of this that we have cited over here, we've given over here, and want to share it with us, feel free to reach us out. Okay, now go to the last section, which I would call as the reality check. We have told that in a finite sequential game, always the first mover will try to do the back calculation, use the backward induction, and finally decide upon the strategy which is suited to him or her the best. But does it always happen? Can there not be a situation where there are deviations? There can be, and that's where this game called ultimatum game comes into picture. So what happens in this game? There's a fixed number of dollar bills for both players. There are two players, let's say 5. The total amount of bill or total amount of dollar available to them is 5, and makes an offer how to share it, which Beth, the other player, can either accept or reject. What happens if she accepts? She means Beth. If Beth accepts Anne's offer, then the bills are divided as agreed upon. If she rejects, then nobody gets anything. Let's go to the game tree. What happens over here? Let's say $5 are there, right? And Anne is getting the privilege of offering it first or making the deal. So Anne may offer 0, nothing. So after Anne offers something, Beth may either accept that or reject that. If Beth accepts, then whatever is the offer, they get accordingly. I mean, Anne gets the entire thing and Beth has accepted for 0, so he'll get 0. But if he rejects, then nobody gets anything. Similarly, if Anne offers 1, Beth may either accept. If he accepts, then he gets 1, other person gets 4. If he rejects, nobody gets anything, and similarly all these things. So what would come to your mind at the first shot? So if you do the backward induction over here, you will see that Anne is either offering 1 or 0, which rationally speaking is very evident to us, right? Because that's how it should be. If you're rational and if you're given the chance of dividing a money with any one of you, any of your friends or some strangers, whatever it is, you would try to secure the maximum. Of course, there's a risk of getting rejected, but at least you'd not give out more than 1 or 2 at least. But in reality, that doesn't happen. After field experiments or laboratory experiments were conducted, it was shown that people like to be fair. So Anne usually offers an amount below 5, of course, but close to 1/2 of the total amount. What is the total amount? 5. 1/2 means 2.5. But if Anne offers too little, what happens is Beth usually gets furious and refuses the offer. So both of them get nothing. So what in reality happens is, if let's say the division has to be made between 2 friends who know each other, then it becomes very, very interesting. Because if I'm a friend of yours and you have given the opportunity to divide the money, you may divide it half. Or if I'm a stranger also, you don't want to risk, getting rejected and getting nothing. So that time also you may find it fair or to divide it half. Either to be fair in itself, either you have a preference for fairness, or you just want to avoid risk. Whatever might be, this is what the result shows. And this is another example where people usually deviate from theory. Theoretically, that should not happen. 2.5 should not happen by backward induction. It should happen either 1 or 0, you can check. But in reality, that doesn't happen. So that's why we're breaking free from the concept of rationality and gradually going to something called behavioral game theory. So let us summarize first. So today's lecture we have talked about the basic terminologies, and then we have given a few examples of the game trees, and we have also discussed about exceptions and talked about what we call as the behavioral game theory. This is another offshoot from the classical game theory and is somewhat similar but differs in the basic premises or the assumptions made by the behavioral game theorists, and the assumption being all humans are not rational. They have a bound on their rationality. That's where they coined the terms like bounded rationality and other terms. So this is a very interesting offshoot. If any one of you is interested, can pursue this, can look at the literature on behavioral game theory. I hope all of you would find it very interesting. So with that, I bring today's session to an end. I hope this endeavor of ours to come in a particularly new look must have been a bit more interesting. We're trying our best to come up with newer ways so that we can make it as interesting as possible. So hope you have enjoyed the video, and if you have, then share it with as many people as possible so that most of them can derive the benefit out of it. Thank you. See you in the next video.